Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of the Puck Lines podcast, brought to you in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. Be sure that you take the time to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and most importantly, as you've heard on several episodes now, YouTube. We are only, I believe, 21 subscribers from where we need to be. However, let me bring in my co-host here. Connor, how you doing today?
I'm great, Andrew. It was a great weekend, packed with a lot of sports, specifically hockey. And most importantly, the Bruins finally were able to play this NHL season. So I had a good weekend.
It took long enough.
There was plenty of stuff that happened, and I'm ready to get down to it.
Yeah, let's actually start on the Bruins like we do every episode. You know, not the first item on our agenda today, but just I do have to say the amount of time it took to get a Bruins game is complete and utter bullshit. And yes, we are less than a minute into this episode, and I have already dropped the first explicit word. So I will go tag this episode appropriately now. But that was a horrible, horrible decision by the NHL. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah. And not only just that, but waiting so long for your first game, the Calgary Flames were in the same boat. But now you go playing with the Bruins on Saturday. Now they don't play again until Wednesday.
Which is a whole different, like a whole different issue. Like, not only did you screw up their first game, but you delayed them the second one. It's a weird start to the season. I think we know that. But I don't know, just kind of frustrating as a Bruins fan. And I'm sure more frustrating for the players, right? Like, these guys just want to get going. They don't want to have to wait all damn year to play a game. And then when they get condensed into this second half of the season, I don't know if you've looked at the schedule for the second half of the season, but it is chaos.
That's what confuses me. And I understand that there's probably some conflicts with buildings. Like the Islanders are on like a 13-game road trip because their building's not available yet. The Kraken are on a road trip because their building's not ready yet. So that probably factors into it. But then you look at, later in the season, they have the All-Star break and then the Olympic break.
Yep.
But they're packing this entire season into its typical time frame with all of that included. So it would have made more sense to me to have the NHL, load up a little more games towards the beginning of the season instead of having an absolute wildfire come trade deadline time into the playoffs.
Yeah, it just it doesn't make sense to me the way they're handling the scheduling. And it's not the first year I felt that. I feel like it's been like 3 or 4 years now that I've been like, what are the NHL schedulers doing? And I guess I gave a lot of it to, COVID creating condensed schedules and changing things around. And but even before then, if you really think back, scheduling for the Bruins has been an issue. And I don't want to go too far because I think we're going to talk about scheduling for the whole NHL a little bit more. But I don't know. The Bruins only playing twice in the first 9 days or something of the season just is wild to me. On that topic of the Bruins, yesterday, or the game wasn't yesterday, so that's the wrong day. The game was Saturday. So 2 days ago, the Bruins honored Jimmy Hayes by placing a small sticker on the back of the helmet. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see that sticker on the back of a Saint Patrice Bergeron helmet. But yesterday, an article came out in the Boston Globe that identified basically from the family that Jimmy Hayes' toxicology report included fentanyl and cocaine as substances. And I think as a Bruins fan, as a Boston hockey fan, I think I've said this on the show before, the Jimmy Hayes thing hit hard for me. And this made it hit even harder because I think it's something that so many people struggle with, that there's such a stigma around that
Mhm.
it's just, I don't know. I don't know that I have any words for it. It's a damn shame. Two young kids, a family. I think it was his wife when I was reading the article that said, if Jimmy could have made a different decision, he would have. He'd still want to be here for his family. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen, and so I urge people who might be listening or who have family members, don't let the stigma of getting help impact you actually going to get help, because I think that's the last thing you want to have happen for you or your family, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. I just, there's no other way of describing it, and it was a tough thing to read yesterday, but I'm not sure that it was surprising. But I guess I'll pass it over to you. I just kind of wanted to get my thoughts out there on the Jimmy Hayes thing.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely share a lot of the same sentiments as you. And to be clear, the Dan Shaughnessy article from the Globe here that we're referencing attributes this to Jimmy had some injuries during his playing time where he was prescribed pain medication and he was never able to shake it at the end of his career going into civilian life. Like I said, I share the same sentiments as you, so I'm not going to regurgitate that. But where this took me, kind of, I thought about this for a couple hours last night. Everything that had just happened with Robin Lehner setting the Twitter world on fire with his accusations of teams that are giving prescription painkillers or Ambien, etc., to players without a prescription.
Yep.
This is going to open a whole new door. I hope. I hope that the NHL takes what he was talking about seriously, which seems that they have. And now that they see this coming out and, the Hayes family opening up to it, because his father said that he used to be an addict and he's been clean for, some years now. And he noticed the issues going on with Jimmy and tried to help him, etc. He wasn't ready yet. Then shortly after, he reached back out to his father and they got him into a treatment facility to get some assistance. I hope that the NHL sees this and they actually do something about it. Because right now, my faith in the NHL and the NHLPA as organizations are at a rock bottom.
Yep.
And I want to see some actions, not just words, not just a hashtag hockey is for everyone, not a hashtag Bell let's talk. Put your foot forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think we talked about it on our bonus episode, right, briefly, but just the concept that the NHL doesn't seem to be wrapping their head around is that these are people, right? Like these are real people, and I think the stigma around mental health and what's been happening in the league and players taking the time, right, to care for themselves is important. But to me, it feels like the players are having to drive this. And I know the NHL would say, wow, we have an assistance program and an 800 number. Like, yeah, those things are great, but these are people. They're not machines. You can't just pump them full of drugs and say, get back out there. I was talking earlier with someone and I said, what really bothers me about it the most, I think, right? And I just haven't been able to shake like this awful feeling since reading that article, right? I mean, I think just when you consider that family and what they've meant to the city of Boston and to the hockey community, it's this unnerving feeling. If somebody's life is going to do it, if it's really going to impact change, I sure as hell hope it's Jimmy Hayes. Because as a human, as an individual, he gave you every ounce of himself. Yep. And that's the type of person that should cause a massive shift and not, like you said, just a hashtag or some 800 number that the league says is available. Go and take care of these people like they're really people, not your machine, not your product, not just your sport. And that's it for me. It's I know I'm not being super articulate. Like, this is probably the least articulate I think I've ever been on this podcast, but it's baffling to me that the league hasn't changed the mentality. And I love this sport and I love the toughness, right? The Chara playing with a jaw wired shut makes for a great story and a loud ovation. But like, is that really a good thing? Like, as a hockey fan, stop and ask yourself, is that really a good thing? What is that doing to the people? The people, not the product.
Yeah, and I think my last thought here, because I just started thinking of this as you started talking again, doesn't the NHL do random drug testing on all of their players?
I believe so, yeah.
I would assume that if teams, if Robin Leonard's, what he's saying is truthful, that players are getting narcotics, for pain to help them through, but not being prescribed them officially. At some point, you would have thought that the NHL would have come across a few of these players in a random drug screening and see it. How do you not question it?
I think that drags us back down the hole of the NHL and what has clearly become a story of sweeping things under the rug. We've always known they've done it. I think this last year and a half or two has just proven how much they've done it. And this is likely just the top of the story, or the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, there's likely way more under here. And frankly, I'm going to make a harsh statement, but I don't know how Gary Bettman is still the commissioner after all of these things, one after another, have broken. Like, you cannot change it systematically overnight, but what you can do is systematically change your leadership quickly. Get rid of Bettman, get rid of half the league office if you have to. Like, clearly there's something wrong here. And I just think it's time for change, but I don't anticipate or seeing that happen. It's just, I think that's where we are right now, is at some point that's the change you're going to need to see change in the culture. But I don't know. I don't want to take the whole episode on this. I just felt like it was an important topic. I want to stress to our listeners, if you or somebody or somebody in your family needs help, just do everything you can to learn from these moments and treat this life as a lesson, right? Don't let him die in vain in such a horrible situation. If you can help somebody, try the best you can. I know you can't always help somebody, but that's the plea I make today, I guess, is help if you can, right? And I think on a lighter note, let's talk about opening night, because that turned into a long segment that I didn't mean it to be. So
yeah, absolutely. So of course, like we had said before we started on the Hayes topic there, the Bruins opened their night Saturday night against the Dallas Stars at the TD Garden, and they squeaked out a 3-1 win on the back of the 1A or 1B goaltender Jeremy Swayman, Andrew's favorite Bruins roster player at the moment. So what were some of your takeaways from the game on Saturday, Andrew?
So I think I had kind of three primary tweets that night that can describe and summarize my watching of that game. So the first one was the ovation that Bruce Cassidy and Chris Kelly got was just fantastic. I enjoyed that to every extent of the game, and I posted, the Bruce Cassidy thumbs up with him asking for the extra guac at Chipotle. So that was the start of my evening. From real analysis, I like the DeBrusk goal. I think him having the game-winning goal in game one is signifying of what this season is supposed to be for him. Marchand potting the other two. Shocker, right? I mean, he's clearly out to have another season. He didn't miss the puck on that penalty shot, so I was really proud of him. Um, so I guess there's that, and then Swayman.
Okay.
Swayman he didn't see a lot, but he looked poised. He looked comfortable. I mean, I think it was Andrew Raycroft maybe who said, right, like the hardest thing to do as a goaltender is to stand there and get no work and just not be into the game, right? So, I mean, not only was he poised, but he kept his head in the game. He kept himself, there. And frankly, I saw some complaints about the goal he did let in. Listen, you put any NHL player in a position where three guys are down in the corner and there's nobody covering him, and he's got an open look at the net one-on-one against the goalie, at least 50% of the time he's going to beat the goalie. That is a goal scorer's dream, to be standing empty on the ice one-on-one with the goalie. So I don't put that on Swayman. I don't think that was on him. I think he played a good game. I will, for the record, for our listeners, for the people adding me on Twitter, I am all for Ullmark getting the next game. I don't know that he will, and I think it might create chaos because they're going to want him to play that game against Buffalo. But whether or not he gets the next game, I don't know. I'm fully for him getting the next game. I think you need to have both guys in a rhythm. I'm going to go on the edge here and say it needs to be a 1A situation.
Okay. Now, here's the
558 likes. Sorry. Got excited there.
Yeah. So Andrew referenced the other tweet. So while we're talking about the goalies, figure we'll throw it up for the YouTube viewers. There was the lovely tweet of the goalie controversy and the goalie drama on the Bruins. But I think you're right on the goaltending. I think Ullmark probably should get a game this coming week. But I still go back to Cassidy saying that they're going to ride the hot hand. If you're truly sticking to your ride the hot hand, that means you ride one goaltender until he stumbles. Yeah. But I understand it's the beginning of the season and you have to get both of your goalies involved.
And that's it for me. I think the ride the hot hand comes into play, let's say 10 games in. Right? You get, of the first 10, you get each of them 5. However you choose to do it, whether you want to do, 2 and 2 and alternate, or kind of however you want to do that, I'm fine with. But I think each guy needs 5. And then, yeah, I mean, ride the hot hand, right? Like, I'm all for that. I've talked about this on previous episodes. Goaltenders are funny creatures.
Yeah.
They get in these headspaces. If he's locked in and he's ready to go and he can play a 12-game stretch and win all 12 games, then hell yeah, you put him in net, right? Like, but you don't Carter Hart the hell out of him, and you don't leave him in situations where he's going to get burned. You signed a goaltender who's a professional, who's got experience, who played on a god-awful team and still did well. So, like, you've got a guy. That said, yeah, play the hot hand. I'm all for that. People don't seem to be able to give me that middle ground that I'm asking for from them, right? Like, I'm not saying play Swayman 100% of the time or play Ullmark 100% of the time or even split it 60-40. I'm saying manage your goaltending like you have goalie Bob as your goalie coach. He is literally a top-tier goaltending coach who's involved with the decisions Cassidy is making. So how about we take advantage of that resource and freaking start the guy he recommends? Okay, Bruins fans, how about you don't know what the hell you're talking about? I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Connor doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, but you know who does? Goalie Bob. So shut the hell up. There's no controversy. There's no drama. You saw them at the end of that game. They embraced. It was perfect. Let goalie Bob decide who's in nets. And that's how you play the season. End rant.
Now, outside of the goalie controversies going on here, Saturday's game, I really focused on a couple areas. I didn't really care to pay too much attention to the first line, and the second and the third defensive pairs, I really kind of ignored. I was really focused on Derek Forbert in the top defensive pairing and how that looked. And then I was fascinated on the second and third line, and then how Nosek would look in a fourth line role.
Okay.
Let's start with the defense since there's only really one pairing. Forbert didn't really impress me.
Really?
He was okay. He was serviceable. He did what he was supposed to, but there was no wow factor. There was no, oh, okay, like this guy's solid, like out of the norm. Like that's what, there wasn't any of that. There was no wow factor or pop factor to me.
But did you expect that? That's my question back to that, right? Like I don't expect that. I kind of take the Cassidy approach. What did he say after the game? If I don't notice him, he's had a good game. Like
I'll give you that, but when you're playing on a top pair with Charlie McAvoy, I'm expecting to see a little something.
No, because do you know what you saw? You saw Charlie McAvoy. McAvoy had a lights out game. Like he played really, really well, with the exception of a couple of penalty calls there, and one of them I think was a half-assed call. But yeah. I think he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He made McAvoy be able to be Charlie McAvoy. I don't know. I mean, I guess this is an expectation setting exercise, right? We have different expectations for him. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I understand that he's there to play the Chara or the Seidenberg role per se, or even on this team, the Brandon Carlo role, the hold it down, but likewise, like how we've said, we want to see a little bit more offensively from Carlo. I hope that will come with Forbert as well. But maybe
I don't disagree.
Maybe my mind will change. It's only been a game, but like I said, I was kind of laser focused on that defensive pairing. The others we'd seen plenty of last year, so I didn't really pay too close attention to them. And then I was really following the second line. Of course, you have Taylor Hall scoring 100 points, Kevin O'Keefe.
Not off to a good start, by the way.
Not off to a good start, but Kevin O'Keefe has Coyle scoring 60. I've got Craig Smith on my fantasy team. They looked good. They looked like they are going to be a good line. They just don't have that chemistry yet because of Coyle having those struggles in the preseason and not being able to play.
Let me ask you a question. Do you feel like Hall, on that goal that they gave up, was kind of half-assing it in the D zone?
Yeah, he was the one that was up at the blue line trying to, I forget who it was, but he was trying to kind of pinch up against the wall up on their defender while he dumped it into the corner, and then 3 out of the 4 Bruins defenders followed him. So you had 4 Bruins players on one side of the ice.
Yeah, and it's like the stick wagging. Like he didn't do it all preseason. That's what baffled me about that particular play. And I know those guys were gassed, right? So like that's definitely part of it, but the stick wagging drives me nuts.
I don't know. That doesn't really, drive me crazy, trying to keep your stick in the lane and you swing it back and forth like a windshield wiper.
But the puck was clearly out of reach.
Yeah.
Right? And for
in his defense, the camera angle that I saw when I saw him, kind of abandoning, like he thought he was going to get a breakaway or something, I couldn't see where that other defenseman was on the other side of the ice.
Yeah, and I'm going off of memory. I just remember it being like, right, like we don't actually have, for our YouTube watchers, we don't actually have this play up in front of you. Like we're going off of memory here, but I guess for me, like I want to see more of that effort. I saw it in preseason, so I don't want to hold it against him for one game, right? Like I don't think it's worthy of talking about any further. Just kind of one of those plays where I was like, hey, I think the whole team there was gassed, and I would have liked to see a little bit more out of your elite guy in Hall, just kind of putting in that second effort. One of the things that impressed me most about him last season was his two-way game, something I didn't know Taylor Hall really had, right? And he showed last year that he has an ability to be an elite two-way forward.
Yeah, but I don't know. outside of that gaffe, which led to the goal,
Yeah, they looked good.
I think that line looked really good, puck possession wise. I mean, overall, I mean, I feel like the Bruins just looked like far superior in the speed section of the
Yeah.
game. Dallas looked like they were monkeys chained to a tree all game.
I would say this, and I don't know if it's because Dallas looks so slow, but would you maybe go out and say that this is the fastest team the Bruins have had in the last decade?
Yes.
I mean that is 100% right. Like anecdotal. I don't have any sort of evidence for that, but I would say this is the fastest the team's looked in a decade, maybe more. I guess my last kind of thought on that game from my side was just yes, that second line looked good. I was happy with that. The thing that drove me nuts in my third tweet from that night, right, was they played the first lights out, came out shot out of a cannon. Second period, you saw those classic Bruins. They forgot that the period was going on for 13, 14 minutes, came out, tried to get caught up essentially. And then all of a sudden, third come out and close the game. Like they've got to stop giving up in that second, early second to mid second time frame, because those are when they blow games. Almost consistently, that's when they blow the game.
Yeah. I actually remember having that conversation with you via text when that was going on. And we both kind of agreed that the third period was coming. The Bruins are a great third period team. And of course, we were right. They pulled it out, got the W, and they moved on. Now, we did touch on this next topic a little bit in our bonus episode last week, but we want to give it a little time of day by itself here. Leading into that game, of course, the biggest news was Charlie McAvoy and his extension. It's an 8-year contract carrying a $9.5 million AAV. What are your thoughts now after being able to let that simmer for the weekend?
I'm still happy. I don't know why everybody's so up in arms. Like in 3 years, this deal's going to look like an absolute steal. I mean, I get, we had a YouTube commenter. I get the comparison to the Pastrnak contract, right? Like, well, Pasta took 6.66 or whatever. And like, yeah, he did. And he did it in a time where the cap wasn't projected to go where it's projected to go in the next 3 to 5 years. And while Pasta didn't get paid then, his next contract, which is not this season, but at the end of next season, is going to look damn similar. Like I hope that people recognize that. And then I think the third point I'll make to that is look at the market of defensemen. I think for our YouTube, folks, you've got a graphic here, but the market for defensemen is what it is. He got paid market price. I mean, look at the Nurse contract. Like, so, okay, let's compare Nurse to McAvoy. Who's better?
Overall game, Charlie McAvoy.
Right. And I'm sorry, right. Like you are going to have the people who have the counter argument that he's not right the best defenseman or even the best,
That's where I could understand some of these people who were, oh my God, that was so much money. Because if you look at
Seth Jones got the same money.
The Werenski and the Makar, they are the, shooting the lights out defensemen. They're going to score you a bajillion points. They're going to drive offense on your team. McAvoy hasn't gotten there yet.
But how many shots on goal did he have?
However,
in that first game?
No, let me finish first. I think the important part of why the Bruins wanted to finish this contract before the season is he is now running your top power play unit, and he is going to score a ton more points in a full 82-game season. So he's going to be able to put up the offensive numbers that we haven't seen from him, to kind of make that contract work out. Now, on the defensive side of the game, I think McAvoy is a far better defender than everybody on that list. Maybe you could argue Nurse as a comparable on the defensive side of the game.
I guess for me, part of this I think is a mindset issue for me. Like I don't pay my defensemen to score goals. I know they need to contribute to the offense, which is why I asked the shots on goal question. Like they need to get the puck to the net, but I don't pay my defensemen to score goals, and that's probably just an old school mentality, right? You need those offensively gifted defensemen now in this league, and I guess
So,
I'll live with that, but I'm not happy about it.
so you were okay with letting Krug walk when he did, I would assume?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was sad. I'm a Torrey Krug fan as like a human being and as a Bostonian. Like I
Yep.
think he made a good Bostonian, right? Like I know
Yeah.
an implant Bostonian that meshed well with the city that named his dog Fenway. Like I love Torrey Krug,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not paying him like that.
Okay, fair. I saw this contract more as a we're going to pay you for what we believe you're going to be rather than pay you for what you are. Because if it was another pay you for what you are deal, I think it was going to be a bridge until, coming out of whatever funky cap restrictions there are because of, the shutdowns over the last 2 seasons. So I like the contract, on a whole overall, because I think this is going to be a steal in 3 years when the cap starts to go up.
Yes. And I guess that's it for me. I'm frustrated by the whole thing. The fact that there are Bruins fans complaining about this just is mind-boggling to me. And that's the frustration you're hearing from me today is I see so many fans baffled by this that I'm like, do you watch or appreciate the game or do you just bitch all day?
It's
Which one is it?
the only reason is because this is the richest contract in NHL Bruins history. That's the only
Fine.
reason why people are up in arms, because it's something they're not used to having to deal with, because the Bruins
Oh,
have, always been a team that, takes less. Well, here's the facts, people. All of the contracts that have signed, whether it was Rask, Krejci, Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak, that was in a completely different cap world. Before the Vegas Golden Knights were here, before the Kraken are here, before this new TV deal, before anybody had cracked $10 million, except for maybe Kane and Taves. And I lied. Zach Parise did as well, I believe. But it's a new era. This is the new era of Boston Bruins. McAvoy is probably going to be the new hometown discount ceiling.
right.
I would imagine that 9.5 is as much as you're going to get. On a next Pasternak contract, I could see him signing probably somewhere between 8 to 9.
I would have pegged it at 8.5. So we're spot on where we.
Yeah. So
I mean, listen. I guess for me, like to your point, the league is changing in terms of how the money is structured and how much money is going to be available. And good, Jacob stopped being a cheap ass. Like, hey, shocker. Like, I don't know the biggest contract thing. Yeah, of course it's the biggest contract. It's another year of things being more expensive. Your toilet
yeah.
paper is more expensive too. Does that mean it's the best? Never mind. Anyways, let's. I think we can move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of contract extensions, let's kind of move over to around the NHL here and go over the signings. It was a star-studded week since our last full-fledged episode. Brady Tkachuk re-ups with Ottawa on a 7-year, $8.2 million annual value contract where he gets a no movement clause in the final 3 years of his deal. Then you have Matthias Ekholm extension in Nashville, 4 years, 6.25 AAV. Really like that contract. Nick Suzuki signs an extension in Montreal to avoid the carousel of offer sheets. Signs 8 years, 7.875 AAV, and he has a modified no trade in the final 3 years of that deal. And then, of course, the pesky Lou Lamoriello signs Ryan Pulock extension, 8 years, 6.15 AAV. And here's the interesting part that I saw on that. He has a no trade clause, full no trade clause in years 1 through 5, and then a modified no trade in the final 3 years for Pulock. Out of those extensions, what kind of jumps into the top of your head? Because I know you kind of chuckled there and you were making some faces at some of these.
I guess the Nick Suzuki signing is a reactionary thing to me, right? Like, oh, we don't want to end up here again. Like, I don't know that was the best negotiated contract that's ever been negotiated.
Yeah.
And then I think just the Ryan Pulock deal, I don't think it's bad. Like, it's not a bad deal. I think it was a decent deal. I just think it's one of those ones where I wonder what the future of that organization looks like and how they're planning to structure a win now versus win later mentality.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting signing at an interesting time.
Yeah. The one thing that I did kind of want to talk about with the Nick Suzuki extension, it gave me Clayton Keller like post-traumatic stress vibes. So Clayton Keller, when he came out of his entry-level deal, he signed a $7.1 million AAV 8-year extension, right? Crazy amount of money, crazy amount of term for somebody that you have such a small sample size with. Nick Suzuki's in that same boat. Very small sample size after getting him from Vegas. This isn't even somebody that they drafted and brought up in their own organization. And you throw max term and a whole lot of money at him. Well, look what happens with Clayton Keller in Arizona. He pretty much fell off the side of the boat. He's really not what they expected. This is very, very heavily a pay you for what we believe you're going to be deal. And I hope that this gamble doesn't end up as egg on the face here.
Hope it doesn't end up like our last week of gambling, but we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Yes.
I guess for me on that topic, right? Like, I'm just worried not even that he doesn't turn out to be right. Like you use the same term for McAvoy, right? Like I think they're very different situations. To me, one is a known commodity with a lot of experience, and the other is a little bit more than that, right? I think that's what it is for me, and that's why I just kind of laughed, right? Like that's a big contract for. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know about that one. That was a weird one for me. That and the Pulock ones were just not, I guess, not what I was expecting from where those franchises are right now and what my understanding of what those franchises were trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I will agree with you there, especially on the Pulock contract, because like you said, you don't know where that team's really headed in the future.
Right.
Which is kind of, flawless transition into talking about the Islanders for a moment here.
In all honesty, folks, I had not even looked at the agenda. I did not realize we were doing that, but that was a good segue that I just ruined by laughing about it.
Everybody expects the Islanders to come out as a house on fire and, take off and win their division. I was one of the ones in our preview of this division who I wasn't very high on the Islanders. I thought they're not as good as everybody thinks they are. They are a compilation of the oldest veterans in the NHL, in my opinion. And they've started off their first 2 games with 2 losses. And what's most important to me here, which threw a huge red flag and why I wanted to bring this up, their goal differential is a -7 in 2 games. That does not happen on a Barry Trotz team.
No.
So I understand that it's only 2 games, but this threw the red flags because of that and the fact that they have like 13 games in a row on the road while they're waiting for their arena to be completed on the island.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, and again, it's a 2-game sample size, so forgive the dramatics, but you're playing 13 games on the road and you're off to that start. You could potentially be out of it before your season even really starts. Like and I hope I'm wrong just for the sake of like competitive hockey. Right? Like
Yeah,
I want
absolutely.
the division to be competitive, but like that's a startling statistic for a Barry Trotz team.
Yeah. And then with being a -7 in the first week of the season, that kind of brings us to the Montreal Canadiens.
Couldn't
They
have
are
happened
a
to a better team.
they are a whopping 0-3, and they do have the -7 goal differential. Was not expecting this, especially since one of their games that they played was against Buffalo during our last bonus episode, where Buffalo soundly spanked them on their way to starting the week 2-0. But Montreal has, some injuries. Weber's not playing. Carey Price is out.
But those are longer term issues. So it's not like those are, this week issues. Those are something they're going to have to work through if they really want to be competitive.
So that's my question to you. Do you think that this is indicative of the season that Montreal is going to have? Or do you think this is just kind of the sting in the wound at the beginning of the season while they're putting pieces in place to replace who they lost?
I think it's kind of a cop out, right, to give you this answer, but I don't know yet, right? Like 3 games isn't a big enough sample size. I'm worried about that organization, right? I mean, we talked about Montreal significantly in our bonus episode, but like these aren't inconsequential losses, and I don't know that the organization has the depth or the leadership without Carey Price,
Or
right?
Shea
Or Shea
Weber?
Weber for that matter, right? Like I just don't know that they have the depth and leadership to be able to work through those things. Again, for the sake of the division we're in, like I'd like them to because I'd like it to be somewhat competitive. But I mean, imagine a world where you've got Montreal and the Islanders not being competitive, and then you've got Buffalo who will eventually, after 10 games, become Buffalo again. Like all of a sudden, your division becomes far less competitive than everybody anticipated it being, if that were
Yeah.
to hold true.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I do want to be very, very clear on, we are not trying to, talk poorly or shame on these teams because of, losing 2 to 3 games in the first week of the season. By no means are we trying to, put the cart ahead of the horse. However, for these teams that struggle in the first month of the season and can barely put points and wins on the board, you will quickly bury yourself in the rankings and make it almost impossible to claw your way back into playoff contention. The Atlantic and the Metropolitan Division this year are stacked.
Yeah.
You cannot have horrible months or weeks and expect to still make the playoffs in these divisions. And that is the point that I want to drive home. Not that we're just, ragging on the Islanders or Montreal for a bad start.
No, I mean, I'm ragging on Montreal because they're Montreal, and I'm going to. But
Fair enough.
Your point is taken. I'm being a bit disingenuous. Yes, we're not ragging on them, but I do still hate Montreal.
I think the silver lining for these teams is that the NHL has done an awful job at scheduling this season because the end of the year is going to be completely packed. All of the space in between games right now, and then leading up to the All-Star game, and then the Olympic break packs a lot of games in at the end of the season. So it can be a silver lining as far as, oh, well, we don't have a lot of games at the beginning of the season. We can kind of keep ourselves afloat. At the same time, how are you going to feel after an All-Star break, after an Olympic break, and then having to play every other night, sometimes back-to-backs, and, playing 3 games in 4 nights to finish out the season? For some of these teams that have, high-end players who are going to play in the All-Star game or Olympics, that
Or
is going
both.
to be, or both, that's going to be crushing at the end of the season. That's one of the reasons why I don't think Patrice Bergeron puts up a ton of points. I think he's going to get a little more rest this year than normal. And I
Mhm.
think you can probably bet that a lot of the stars in this league are probably going to take some time off. I wouldn't even be surprised if, for example, an Alexander Ovechkin decides to decline going to the All-Star game if picked because he would rather rest himself for the Olympics and the rest of the NHL season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, right, we talked about scheduling earlier in the episode. I think the biggest thing with the scheduling for me is the injuries. You're stacking all of these games right towards the postseason. So
Yeah.
what are you doing? You're potentially risking injury to your all-stars for the start of postseason. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I get there's a ramp up effect, right? Like, I think they try and get these guys to like
Mm-hmm.
slowly work in, right, and not come shot out of a cannon. So many games you can't handle it. But like, you also gave them 10 days off between their last preseason game. Like, that's another way to get people injured, right? Like, it's a weird
vibe.
Yeah, it is.
It's everything about this beginning of the NHL season's been kind of weird, transitioning over to new TV partnerships, etc. It's just felt cattywampus, if you will, like
Ooh,
just
what a
really,
word.
really awkward. And it's not just, our hometown Bruins, it's a lot of other teams who are in the same boat.
Yeah.
So I did want to touch on one thing here because you and I have talked about Carter Hart a lot in reference to a Jeremy Swayman and his development in the Bruins. I watched the Philly versus Vancouver game 3 days ago, and that was insane to watch. Vancouver was just absolutely giving it to Philly. Philly looked awful to begin the game. Carter Hart let in some really, really bad goals where he just wasn't putting his foot all the way up against the post, throwing it from, below the goal line and still being able to score a goal. Tough look. And I know I had texted you halfway through that game and said, "Dear Lord, this is awful. Like, Carter Hart is playing atrocious." It was a positive thing. Towards the end of that game, the Flyers pulled their heads out of their ass and managed to come back and push it into overtime. And they eventually went up into a shootout. And Carter Hart in the third period and overtime played like an absolute madman. And he was exactly what you saw 3 years ago, where everybody was expecting, oh my God, Carter Hart's the real deal. He's going to be the next, 1A goaltender of this franchise, all-star worthy, et cetera, et cetera. Did you by chance get to see any of that game or any of the highlights?
I caught the end of the game
The end of it?
because you were texting me and you had piqued my interest enough to tune in, and I think I don't know, I must have done something that got me a free minute, which is unusual in my life, but I did catch the end of it. I thought that so the funny thing, right, is I thought Carter Hart looked great.
Yeah,
Right?
because you
Like
watched
I
the end of the game. Yeah.
right, like I was tweeting jokes about him because I was watching the highlights on Twitter, right, as people were posting them. But like
Mm-hmm.
when I tuned in, I was like, "What's everybody like losing their minds about? This guy looks great." So I clearly only tuned in for that part of the game, so I don't really have much of a take on it, other than inconsistency from your goaltender is terrifying.
Yes. I will caveat the only reason I actually wanted to watch this Philly game is that's the next team the Bruins are going to play this coming Wednesday. Their forward depth looks slow. And not having Voracek in that lineup or Kevin Hayes, you could tell the gaps in their lineup. But their defense is really good. Adding Ristolainen and Ellis, their defense looks solid. And I think if they can pull that defense together and give Carter Hart some confidence, they're going to be a team to be reckoned with in that Metropolitan Division. And of course, additions just by getting people healthy, always helps. You can't complain there, right?
Right.
All right. Now, I mean, that's really all I've got as far as the around the NHL portion. Did you want to add anything else there? Or are you ready to talk about gambling for last week and this week?
Oh, I don't want to talk about gambling, that's for sure. I did not do well. And my video is driving me nuts right now because my internet's clearly lagging. But yeah, I mean, so listen, we started the season 1-4.
Mhm.
The bets we gave you on the show last week were losses. The bets we tweeted out, like I said, ended up 1-4. Wasn't a great week. Bet on some other sports, wasn't a great week. Hell, you win some, you lose some. I'm feeling a little bit like the Canadians. But we're gonna come out week 2. We're gonna do a little bit better. We don't have a ton on the docket to talk about in this episode in terms of new bets to take. I think worth talking about is the Blues versus Coyotes game. We will drop this episode today because that game is tonight.
Correct.
But Blues on the puck line for that game. The Coyotes are what they are. The Blues are just a better team. The Blues should win that by more than 2. I'd probably, because I'm off to a bad start this year, I'm probably going to go 2 units on that bet just to try and make up some of that gap, right? If you're having a decent season, I'd maybe stick to a single unit. But I do feel like it's one that should hit. So I think doing a full unit on this game is fine. For full transparency, I've got a bunch of my bankroll stacked up in the Red Sox right now because it's postseason and I'm from Boston. So you got to do that. But I'll definitely have like a play of the day every other day, probably this week. So be sure to, check us out on the @Pucklines Pod on Twitter. All of our plays go out from there that we're going to officially recommend. Plays that we don't officially recommend will come out from my Twitter account usually. If you want to follow the degenerate special, I think I did what? I took Paul to have a multi-point night the other night at plus 397 or something. I mean, if I had hit it, it would have been great, but
Yeah.
obviously I didn't, and that's how you land there. But yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think there's a ton to bet on right now. First 2 weeks of the NHL season really aren't ever safe betting. I think we told you guys that last year. It is what it is, right? You're starting to figure out who teams are, how they're going to play, things like that. And then in addition to the fact that hockey's just a hard sport to bet on, especially on the puck line. I enjoy betting on the puck line, but we'll definitely be giving you guys a lot more money line this year to make sure that we stay in that 60 to 70% win rate if we can. No guarantees, obviously, it's betting, but definitely Blues on the puck line's the play I'm going to give out on this episode. And like I said, be sure to follow us on Twitter. I will give more this week. We won't just have one this week, I promise.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that some people might not notice is not all books put out their odds for games so far in advance. I know the book that we use, they have the puck line already for today, but looking at the games tomorrow, they don't have any odds for the puck line yet. So we didn't want to really get too far ahead and, put anything on money lines or anything like that. We will definitely put out some more via our puck lines account. And then of course, Andrew's Twitter account as well. So definitely follow us over there so you can keep up. And hopefully Andrew can get this money train back on the tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I had a good day in football yesterday, even with the Patriots, blowing that game. So it's not all down. It's just being 1-4 on the start of the season isn't where we want you guys to be if you follow all of our picks. So hopefully we have a better week this week. I think, like I said, I'd even go as far as saying this one's maybe the lock of the week, right? Like the Blues should handle Arizona pretty damn easily. Like if this one goes upside down, I'll be sure to tweet out all my emotional gifs of like me sitting in my car crying, right? No, I'm just kidding. But but like this one feels pretty good. No guarantee in betting, but I think this one should be pretty good.
The caveat that people I think need to understand is typically within the first 10 games of the NHL season, everybody's advised to not gamble heavily on the first couple weeks, because there's a lot of shaking out in rosters, players that come up and they get a taste, they get 3 or 4 games, and then they get sent down to the AHL, and the veterans come and take their place in the lineup, and things solidify themselves for what the team is going to be. So right now in this first 10 games, there's a lot of moving and shaking. So we are truly gambling here, where things will settle down. It'll be, a little more run of the mill after, week 3 and on.
I do want to say, our Twitter advice, while you'd be 1-4, you're only down 3 units if you followed exactly how we told you to bet. Because we doubled a unit on that game, on that last game, the one we won, you'd still only be down 3 units. So you shouldn't be out of a ton of money right now. So if you are, send me a DM or tag us on Twitter, and we can maybe try and help you figure out what went sideways there, because you certainly shouldn't be hurting right now unless you're like me, putting multiple units on Taylor Hall having a multi-point night, which I explicitly told you not to take. So that one's on you if you took that. But again, you should only be down 3 units right now. So nothing to panic about this early in the season. Again, I'd lay light this week. We probably won't have more than 4 or 5 picks in the whole week. There are days where later in the season I'll have 4 picks in a night. So just keep that in mind. Get kind of your mojo going. But I think that's it for the gambling corner. I think that's it for the episode. So thank you everyone for listening. Thanks Mark Allred and the Black and Gold Productions crew for supporting our show. You can follow the Daily Action on Twitter, Facebook, starting to get better at Instagram, at PucklinesPod. Find us on YouTube by searching Pucklines Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe so we can get rid of that URL we keep talking about. We're almost there. And you can give me a follow on Twitter at Andrew Taverna.
And you can always find me at Connor Green 777 on Twitter. And thank you everyone for supporting the podcast. We've had a lot of great reviews and listenership over the last few weeks. Very appreciative of everybody who's went and subscribed to our YouTube channel. Keep that up so we can get rid of the serious cereal. And of course, it's always been great, and we'll talk to you next time.